Hello, I am the Cave Junkie, and today I'm gonna read The Great Gatsby. There we go. Yeah. Alright. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'm starting on the page before the introduction. Yes. Then wear the gold hats if you want to, if that will move her. If you can bounce high, bounce for her too. Till she cry, "Lover gold-hatted high bouncing lover, I must have you." Thomas Park Dinvilliers is a what? What did I just read? Okay, the Scribner Classic, which means subscribe. Okay, that's the publishing. I'm not reading the copyright either. Okay, except the date of the copyright is 1925. The printing of this book is 1986. Alrighty. Introduction. After the half-century and more since its publication, The Great Gatsby stands as Scott Fitzgerald's masterpiece, and indeed as one of the masterpieces of 20th century American literature. It is studied in English classes in high schools and colleges across the country, and more copies of the Scribner Subscriber paperback edition are now sold annually than all editions in the author's lifetime. I was recently asked whether Fitzgerald himself would have been surprised to learn that he had written a classic. Perhaps not. His immediate hope, of course, was to write a thoroughly contemporary novel about American society in the 20s and at the time. Another instant bestseller like this novel, The Side of Paradise, 1920. Yet he might not be startled today to see that his book had transcended its own age and turned into a timeless classic. For he had wanted Gatsby to be, in his words, a consciously artistic achievement. The book has simply lived up the author's expectations. As early as the summer of 1922, when Fitzgerald was just beginning to conceive the novel, he wrote to Maxwell Perkins at Subscribers, "I want to write something new, something extraordinary, and beautiful, and simple, and intricately patterned." He wanted to break new ground as a writer, to write something significantly different from his two earlier, loosely constructed and unabashedly semi-autobiographical novels, This Side of Paradise, which had won him early critical acclaim as a young talent in American letters, was patchwork of his college writings, short stories and dramatic skits, many of which had already seen print in the Nassau Lit, a Princeton undergraduate publication. Alright, let's see how many more. The introduction goes from page 7 to page 20. So you're not going to get to hear the rest. So, yeah. The story starts right now. The Great Gatsby. Once again to Zelda. Why is it folded? There we go. Chapter 1. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since.
Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone,
He told me,
just remember that all people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had.
he didn't say any more, but we've always been unusually communicative in a reserved way, and I understood that he meant a great deal more than that. In consequence, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments, a habit that has opened up many curious natures to me, and also made me the victim of not a few veteran bores.
Ah!
Okay. Pause so I may hydrate. There we go. Alright. Where were we? The abnormal mind is quick to detect and attach itself to this equality when it appears in a normal person. And so it came about in college. I was unjustly accused of being a politician because I was privy to the secret griefs of wild, unknown men. Most of the confidences were unsought. Frequently I have feigned sleep, preoccupation, or a hostile levity when I realized by some unmistakable sign that an intimate revelation was quivering on the horizon. For the intimate revelations of young men, or at least the terms in which they express them, are usually plagiaristic, and marred by obvious suppressions. Reserving judgments is a matter of infinite hope. I am still a little afraid of missing something if I forget that. Ooh! As my father snobbishly suggested, and I snobbishly repeat, a sense of fundamental decencies is parceled out of unequally at birth. Face is a bit wet, but it'll dry eventually. Who cares? Alright. And after boasting this way of my tolerance, I come to the admission that it has a limit. Conduct Conduct may be founded on the hard rock or the wet marshes, but after a certain point, I don't care what it's founded on. When I came back from the east last autumn, I felt that I wanted the world to be in uniform and at a sort of moral attention forever. I wanted no more righteous excursions with privileged glimpses into the human heart. Only Gatsby, the man who gives his name to this book, was exempt from my reaction. Gatsby, who represented everything for which I have an unaffected scorn. If personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures, then there was something gorgeous about him, some heightened sensitivity to the promise of life, as if he were related to one of those intricate machines that register earthquakes 10,000 miles away, like a Richter scale. This responsiveness has had nothing to do with that flabby impressionability which is dignified under the name of creative temperament. Yeah. It was an extraordinary gift for hope, a romantic readiness such as I have never found in any other person, and which it is not likely I shall ever find again. No, Gatsby turned out all right at the end. It is what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams, and that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short-winded elations of men. Okay. So we're on page 2 of like 190, 89, 82, 182. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay. My family have been prominent, well-to-do people in the Middle Western city for 3 generations. The Caraways are something of a clan, and we have a tradition that we're descended from the Dukes of Buccleuch. But the actual founder of my line was my grandfather's brother, who came here in 51, sent a substitute to the Civil War, and started the wholesale hardware business that my father carries on today. I never saw this great uncle, but I'm supposed to look like him, with special reference to the rather hard-boiled painting. How do you hard-boil a painting? Oh, whatever. That hangs in Father's office. Okay, that's grammar. I graduated from New Haven in 1915, just a quarter of a century after my father, and a little later I participated in that delayed Teutonic migration known as the Great War. Teutonic migration? Oh. I enjoyed the counter raid so thoroughly that I came back restless. Instead of being the warm center of the world, the Middle West now seemed like the ragged edge of the universe. So I decided to go east and learn the bond business. Everybody I knew was in the bond business. James Bond. So I supposed it could support one more single man. All my aunts and uncles talked it over as if they were choosing a prep school for me, and finally said, "Why, yes!" with very grave, hesitant faces. Father agreed to finance me for a year, and after various delays, I came east permanently, I thought, in the spring of 22. This is my first time reading this, and as it said in the book, if I ever read this in high school, which I haven't yet, we can just listen to this recording. Okay. The practical thing was to find rooms in the city, but it was a warm season, and I had just left a country of wide lawns and friendly trees. So when a young man at the office suggested that we take a house together in a commuting town, it sounded like a great idea. He found the house, a weather-beaten cardboard bungalow at $80 a month. But at the last minute, the firm ordered him to Washington, and I went out to the country alone. I had a dog. At least I had him for a few days until he ran away. And an old Dodge and a Finnish woman. He owns a woman, and she's from Finland. And a Finnish woman who made my bed and cooked breakfast and muttered Finnish wisdom to herself over the electric stove. It was lonely for a day or so, until one morning, some man, more recently arrived than I, stopped me on the road. "How do you get to West Egg Village?" he asked helplessly. I told him. "It's down that way." And, yeah, that's how he told him. And as I walked on, I was lonely no longer. I was a guide, a pathfinder, an original settler. He had casually conferred on me the freedom of the neighborhood. And so, with the sunshine and the great bursts of leaves growing on the trees, just as things grow in fast movies, I had that familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer. Ooh, it seems like that's a thing that happens. Science! There was so much to read, for one thing, and so much fine health to be put down out of the young, breath-giving air. I bought a dozen volumes on banking and credit and investment securities, and they stood on my shelf in red and gold, like new money from the mint. promising to unfold the shining secrets that only Midas and Morgan and Masonas. I'm not sure how to pronounce it whenever the A and the E are like one character. I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's A. Masonas. McInnes knew, and I had the high intention of reading many other books besides. I was rather literary in college. One year I wrote a series of very solemn and obvious editorials for the Yale News, and now I was going back to bring back all such things into my life and become again the most limited of all specialists, the well-rounded man. This isn't just an epigram. Life is much more successfully looked at from a single window. After all. It was a matter of chance that I should have rented a house in one of the strangest communities in North America. It was on that slender, riotous island which extends itself due east of New York. Oh, so Long Island? Woo! It's hard to say the name of islands, apparently. And where there are, among other natural curiosities, two unusual formations of land, 20 miles from the city, a pair of enormous eggs, identical in contour and separated only by a courtesy bay, jut out into the most domesticated body of salt water in the Western Hemisphere. The great wet barnyard of Long Island Sound. Ooh, and finally it said it. Thirst. Nice. They are not perfect ovals, like the egg of Columbus, like the egg in the Columbus story. They are both crushed flat at the contact end, but their physical resemblance must be a source of perpetual confusion to the gulls that fly overhead. To the wingless, a more arresting phenomenon is their dissimilarity in every particular except shape and size. I lived at West Egg, the less fashionable of the two, though this is most superficial tag to express the bizarre and not a little sinister contrast between them. My house was the very tip of the egg, only 50 yards from the Sound, and squeezed between two huge places that rented for 12 or 15,000 a season. The one on my right was a colossal affair by any standard. It was a factual imitation of some Hôtel de Ville in Normandy. If you're retarded, that Normandy is in France. I'm gonna go with that if it's wrong, but now I feel like it might be in the Netherlands. But who cares? Who cares? With a tower on one side, spanking new under the thin beard of raw ivy, and marble swimming pool, and more than 40 acres of lawn and garden. It was Gatsby's mansion, or rather, as I didn't know, Mr. Gatsby. It was a mansion inhabited by a gentleman of that name. My own house was an eyesore, but it was a small eyesore, and it had been overlooked. So I had a view of the water and a partial view of my neighbor's lawn and the consoling proximity of millionaires, all for $80 a month. Across the Courtesy Bay, the white palaces of fashionable East Egg glittered along the water, and the history of the summer really begins on the evening I drove over there to have dinner with the Tom Buchanans. Daisy was my second cousin once removed, and I'd known Tom in college, and just after the war I spent 2 days with them in Chicago. Her husband, among various physical accomplishments, had been one of the most powerful ends that ever played football at New Haven. Is it football or football? Football. Probably football because it's America. America. Yeah. I know I'm weird, but who cares? Why do you care? Just listen to the story be told. And now, while I just told you to do that, and you're listening to me ramble on nothing, I'm going to continue. A national figure, in a way, one of those men who reach such an acute limited excellence at 21 that everything afterward savors of anticlimax. His family were enormously wealthy. Even in college, his freedom with money was a matter up for reproach. But now he'd left Chicago and come east in a fashion that rather took your breath away. Ah! I felt like something bit me. For instance, he'd bought down a string of polo ponies from Lake Forest. It was hard to realize that a man in my own generation was wealthy enough to do that. Why they come east, I don't know. They had spent a year in France for no particular reason, and then drifted here and there unrestfully wherever people played polo and were rich together. "This is a permanent move," said Daisy over the telephone, but I didn't believe it. It had no sight of Daisy's heart. But I felt that Tom would drift on forever, seeking, a little wistfully, for the dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable football game. Alright, let's scratch again, because it feels weird. Take a sip. Water good. Sody pop bad. mile. Okay. And so it happened that on a warm, windy evening, I drove over to East Egg to see two old friends whom I scarcely knew at all. Their house was even more elaborate than I expected, a cheerful red and white Georgian colonial mansion overlooking the bay. The lawn started at the beach and ran toward the front door for a quarter-mile, jumping over sundials and brick walls and burning gardens. Finally, when it reached the house, drifting up the side brought vines as though from the momentum of its run. The front was broken by a line of French windows, glowing now with reflected gold and wide open to the warm, windy evening, and Tom Buchanan, in riding clothes, was standing with his legs apart from the front porch, on the front porch. He had changed since his New Haven years. Now he was a sturdy, straw-haired man of 30, with a rather hard mouth and a supercilious manner. Two shining, arrogant eyes had established dominance over his face and gave him the appearance of always leaning aggressively forward. Not even the effeminate swank of his riding clothes could hide the enormous power of that body. Okay. He seemed to fill those glistening boots until he strained at the top lacing, and you could see a great peck of muscle shifting when his shoulder moved under his thin coat. It was a body capable of enormous leverage, a cruel body. Neck starty hurts. Okay, let me see how much more we have to read, because I was thinking I'd read the whole book to you tonight, but I'm just not in the mood. I might just leave it off here. Let's see. Where does it say chapter 2? Yeah, on page 22. We're on page 6. I'll stop eventually. His speaking voice, a gruff, husky tenor, added to the impression of fractiousness he conveyed. There was a touch of paternal contempt in it, even toward people he liked. And there were men at New Haven who had hated his guts.
Now, don't think my opinion in these matters is final,
He seemed to say.
Just because I'm stronger and more of a man than you are.
We were in the same senior society, and while we were never intimate, I always had the impression that he approved of me and wanted me to like him, with some harsh, defiant wistfulness of his own. He talked for a few minutes,
With this voice,
because why not, on the sunny porch.
I've got a nice place here.
he said, his eyes flashing restlessly. Turning me around by one arm, moved a broad, hand along the front vista, including in its sweep a sunken Italian garden, a half-acre of deep, pungent roses, and a snub-nosed motorboat. How do you even do that? Oh, okay. That bumps the tide shore.
It belonged to Demani, the oil man.
He turned me around again, politely and abruptly.
We'll go inside.
We walked through a high hallway into a bright, rosy-colored space, fragilely bound to the house by French windows at either end. The windows were ajar, and the gleaming white against the fresh glass outside that seemed to grow a little way into the house. A breeze blew through the room, blew curtains in at one end and blew out the other like pale flags, twisting them around, twisting them up towards the front frosted wedding cake of the ceiling, and then rippled over the wine-colored rug. So a maroon-colored rug, or a burgundy, making a shadow on it as wind does on the sea. And I will leave it there, using this old $20 bill as a bookmark. Here, you can have a look. There, too late. If you didn't see it, oh well. That was your problem. No. Hold on. Making sure I know exactly what line to start on later on. Tomorrow when I finish. And I'm not gonna wait for some random time to upload this. I'll upload this immediately. Indubitably. I probably won't read this one tomorrow night. I'll probably do my other book series or start a new one. It depends on how I feel tomorrow. But you'll figure it out. If you liked what you saw, give it a like. If you did not, dislike it. Subscribe if you want more random content that is either educational entertainment, as you just saw, or comedy. And I am not a political correct person, so you can know what kind of comedy I'll have. Yeah, buddy. So have a good one. And it is I think it was like 1 a.m. when I started recording. It won't let me see until I stop recording. So bye. Get out of here. Go.